Welcome to I Love My HBCU ? The podcast where we express our undeniable love for HBCUs, but where we are also not afraid to address a few tough questions. So, sit back, learn a little, love a lot, and rep your HBCU. It's another episode and, of course, another reason to love your HBCU. For those of you watching and not just listening, there's a familiar face on our screen today. Welcome, Tuesday, back to the podcast. How are you doing, Tuesday?
I'm doing really well. Thank you so much for having me.
I'm always excited. The more I talk, you'll be like, oh gosh, that's what's coming. I'm always excited to see Tuesday in the studio, virtual studio of ours, because her smile quite literally it makes my shoulders go down. It makes me say, okay, we're about to have an amazing conversation. For those of you who joined us previously, you know Tuesday was one of our summer series guests, talking about the state of research one pursuit at our different HBCUs. But today, we're having a different conversation. And the conversation, I'm going to call it a love language Tuesday. What do you think?
Mm,
I want to
I
call
like
it
that.
you like that? I want to call it a love letter to our soon to be graduating seniors, recently graduated seniors who are thinking about grad school and not knowing
Mm.
what to expect, not knowing how to navigate. And since Tuesday is right in the throes of grad school, she is going to be our expert in the virtual studio today to tell us exactly what it is undergraduates misunderstand about graduate school and so much more. So, before
Mm.
we get to that though, Tuesday, can you tell us your journey of how you decided it's now. I'm going to grad school
Mm.
right now. Tell us how that worked out for you.
Yeah, so I would say in terms of my grad journey at Morgan, so I previously was working at UMBC. I was an associate director for a center that dealt with technology, and I think that I was really thinking about what I wanted the next 10 years of my life to look like. And yeah, I think that I was kind of in this place of like, where do I want to be? How do I want to exist? And I had previously gone to graduate school, I had gotten my master's, etc. And I was just like, okay, I had kind of been in a PhD journey before. And so I was like, okay, what would it look like to return to graduate school knowing what I know? And so I had applied to a few different schools. And I was just like, okay, if I go back to graduate school, I know that it requires a level of focus where I just need to do grad school. And so I got into Morgan and I wasn't expecting it, which is crazy to apply to grad school and then be like, oh my gosh, I actually
I
got
got
in.
in.
um, but yeah, I think that for me, it was really coming to this place where I wanted a lot more like autonomy and I just kind of missed the academic space. Like I missed teaching a lot. I missed also missed being a student, to be
Mm.
honest. Like I think that there's something really special about this space to kind of think and create. And then for people to support that kind of creation process. And so yeah, I started grad school really with this like deep desire to create again in like a creative but also intellectual space. And so I kind of went just knowing that that was my objective. And of course I had other like more tangible goals, but for the most part I think that's really what was guiding me. Yeah.
So in listening to your story, I think one of the important things to draw out of it is you were working full time before going to grad
Mm.
school. You didn't just leave undergrad and go straight to grad school. Yes?
So initially I did.
Okay.
So initially, yeah. So I went to University of Maryland College Park for undergrad. And I actually was a McNair Scholar while at the University of Maryland. And so for those who aren't familiar, so McNair is a program that really provides a lot of structure and preparation for students who want to go into pursue their doctorates. And so I was one of those students that got trained in research methodologies and, how do you come up with a research question and all the things that you would kind of need to understand research in order to really apply for graduate school. And so I went through that program. I did a research project, and I had actually applied to the PhD at the University of Maryland. I got in, which was phenomenal, and I had a really beautiful experience, I would say, from undergrad to like going into graduate school. Um, and then, there was like a slight disruption in my graduate experience with like, some things. And so around COVID, I stopped at Maryland, and I yeah, just basically had a bit of a break, worked. And all this to say, I think that coming to Morgan for a second time, I guess this is like my second time kind of being in graduate school. I had such a different perspective on graduate education and like what I wanted to get out of the graduate experience that I think was very different than my, I guess, 20-year-old
Of
self coming out
course.
of undergrad and being like, oh my gosh, I'm just, my first graduate check, I was like, oh my gosh, someone's gonna pay me like, I think at the time it was like $21,000 to go to grad. I was like, oh my gosh, I'm rich. Like I made it. I really thought that I had made it because I had never seen that much money at
Yeah.
one time ever. And so that was an experience. I think, of course, now, I'm in my 30s. And so, that money is not, it doesn't excite me in the same way. But saying all that to say, I feel very grateful to have had that experience and to know now and be very clear on like what I need as a graduate student, what my objectives are, what my timeline looks like, what kind of supports, what kind of mentorship,
Yeah.
the difference between advising and mentorship, all those things I feel like are very, very clear now. So yeah.
So I wanted the distinction, or I wanted to make the distinction, especially for our undergraduates or our graduating seniors, soon to be grad students who are listening. My journey was very, very different. I was one of
Mm,
those kids that I started college at the age of 16. I
mm,
graduated undergrad at 19. I was bored. I
mm,
did not feel that my undergraduate program was as challenging for me as I would have liked it to be, or maybe as I was seeking. And that's the only reason why I went to grad school. Like, I literally went to my
mm,
president's office and I said, okay, so what's next? And literally, he called Howard University's president and said, this kid over here.
mm,
We need to challenge her. So I'm sending her over to you. I'm so serious.
mm,
That's how I ended up at Howard University for my master's, and very shortly thereafter my doctorate, because I did my master's in a year. And so again, I
mm,
still wasn't feeling like this was challenging me. I only share that as a different experience, as somebody who went
mm,
immediately afterwards, revealing the age that I went in, because I want to ask you, based on your experience, do you think, and remember, this is our love letter, if you will, to our
mm.
current graduating seniors or soon to be graduate students who are leaving directly from undergrad. Do you think there is value in not going immediately afterwards? And disclaimer, I'm fully aware that what you plan on studying may end up actually being the larger deciding factor when it comes to
Mm,
that question. But do you think waiting, doing something else after undergrad, gaining experience might be a better way to go, as opposed to just going immediately to grad school afterwards like I did?
yeah, I think it's interesting because I've had kind of both experiences. So I've had the experience of coming straight from undergrad straight into graduate school at the same institution where I went to undergrad. So I think that, so first to answer your question, I think it's nuance, which, is always the kind of, academic answer that people give. And they're like, it's
It's
nuance. And I'm like,
nuanced.
but I think it is, right? I
Sometimes
think
that means
that
they don't really want to answer the question, but let's see what Tuesday means here.
No, I do want to answer the question, but I think that there are many layers here. I think that for me, initially, So I want to take a step back actually to my high school years because coming out of high school, my motivation for college, um, which I was having this conversation with a friend. I said, when I was in high school, the thing that really distinguished students who went to private schools, and this is not all, I want to preface it again and say this is not all public schools, but the thing that really distinguished some of the students who I went to school with versus some of my other peers was the question in the space that I was in was, which college are you going to? Um, in other spaces, it was, are you going to college? And I realized that those were really different questions and they had really, really different implications for people's lives,
Mm,
right? I think that the which college was this kind of faith and belief that there was kind of this kind of like inevitability to college, right? It's gonna happen.
it's
So where you
happening.
going? Right? It's happening. That's why we all went to high school.
Yeah.
In other spaces, it was, well, if college happens, because it could not. And I just thought that that the fact that in high school, in my particular high school, that there was just no possibility that people would not go to college. That was just something that everyone expected. So I'm saying that because when I went to actually apply for undergrad, my whole thing, and I mentioned this previously too, was that I didn't want my mother to have to pay. And so everything that I did was really just around, I don't want my mother to have to struggle because she struggled enough to give me the opportunity to go to this private high school. And I see her sacrifice, and I don't want her to have to sacrifice anymore.
Of course.
And I think that even at, I guess, 16, I was acutely aware of how much sacrifice my mother had done. And so saying that as that relates into my graduate journey, I think that for me it was like this is the pathway to success. Like this is no more struggle. And I really believe that. I think and not that I don't subscribe to it a little bit still now, but I think that, like, again, I see the graduate journey way in a very, very different light. But I think that coming out of undergrad, it was this, well, mom didn't have to struggle for me to get through college, and I got through without any loans. And so, I can go to grad school, and then this will be my pathway toward the middle class. And middle class means safe.
Mm.
Again, I think very differently now, but at the time, I think that's where my mind was. It was, I want to be safe. I grew up working class, although, like, I would say most of my family was probably solidly middle class. But my mom was a or a paraprofessional, and so yeah, we just, I would say, grew up probably working class, um, or maybe even the working poor, to be honest. And again, this is like the sociologist in me kind of being like, well, but saying this to say, like, I think that there was such a motivation from undergrad and then going from undergrad into grad school to make sure that my mom was safe and that I was safe. I think that once I had exited grad school around, I think around COVID, and then I actually worked in the world. So this is just a little bit of context. I think it's important, right? Like, I think before we started recording, we started talking about love. And I think that, like, love demands honesty and vulnerability. And so I want to offer that in this love letter to folks. So when I think when I left grad school, I was like, well, I have a master's, so, like, I can get work. Like, this will be nothing. And mind you, there's like a global health crisis happening. Right. And so yeah, I think that there were just a lot of things happening, but I want to say shortly after I left school, I ended up like working at Walmart. I'm very serious. And I think that it was such an important experience for me, I think, to be in a space where in some ways I wasn't I was deeply uncomfortable. I will say
Mm,
that, right? Because I think that so much of my academic life was really based in this idea of like safety and
mm,
middle
mm,
classness. And
mm.
if I can just get there, like I will be safe. And you know, and so saying that to say, I worked at Walmart. I went from Walmart, I think, to working at, I think I worked at Johns Hopkins, which is like a really big jump. But I went from Walmart to Johns Hopkins. I went from Johns Hopkins to UMBC, and then UMBC to then applying to grad school and going to Morgan. But I say that because there was so much life that happened in the in between. And I think that to your initial question around like the life that happens that kind of informs the decision, I think that again, some of that wisdom I think comes from literally being in grad school in my 20s and kind of doing the readings but being a little lost and like what am I doing? What's the purpose of this? Like also I will add, I was in grad school at the height of the Black Lives Matter movement. So there's like, this global reckoning that's happening alongside like just being in grad school. So like
Yeah.
you're doing all these readings and you're seeing people in the streets and you're like, what am I doing? Like, what am I doing reading about
Mm,
Durkheim and
mm.
people are dying? So there was that. Also I think that like I navigated a lot of like depression. I navigated a lot of like just like unique mental health experiences while in grad school. And I think that again, as a love letter, it's like if someone is thinking about like, can they be in grad school with, their unique situation, I think it's important to kind of think through how will you care for yourself in grad school because grad school is, a microcosm of the world. So like the same kind of dynamics that exist in the world exist in grad school, right? And so I think going to grad school for the second time, I had a lot more structure. Like, I had like a care team, whether that was like my primary care physician, or that was like my dentist, or that's my therapist, or that's my psychiatrist. Like, that I have a team of people that care for me, and that because they are showing up for me, I show up differently for myself. I show up differently in community. Um, so yeah. So again, all of that to say, I think that it's really important for people to enter grad school with a kind of clarity around really themselves. And I think that like living a little bit of life can give you a little more clarity. But also I went to grad school with people who also went straight from undergrad straight through and did their doctorate straight through, I think in like 5 to 7 years. Um, and we're very successful. Now they work for some people are in academia, some people work for think tanks. Um, and shout out to my cohort that came out of University of Maryland because they are brilliant people.
Yeah.
I think that we all just have our own journeys toward kind of like a self actualization. So I think about grad school as kind of like assisting in some of that. And the more I think you understand yourself, the clearer the path becomes.
So that's
So
what
yeah.
I hear through the whole through the story that you just gave us is it's not timing. It's definitely
Mm,
not so it's not just timing. It's not just age. It's not
hmm
do go right after undergrad or don't go after undergrad. It's not about those questions, but it does have to be about how well do you know yourself and how well can you respond to the needs that you have, even if it's a matter of identifying the different subgroups that might help support those needs along the way. That's what I hear as
mm,
your advice, that it's not if you think you're ready after undergrad then go, but is it what you need in this moment? Is this what
mm,
you are pursuing based on a deeper knowledge of yourself, or just that's the next thing that I'm supposed to be doing kind of deal? So that's what I hear
mm,
from your response. Before we move on, I am going
mm.
to give you this lovely rapid fire. It's different this time.
Okay.
It's graduate school friendly rapid fire. So let's
Okay.
see. Tuesday, before I start, you're only allowed to give one answer. You are not allowed
Okay.
to give me a
Period.
long explication on any one of
Will
these,
not do
okay?
that.
Thank you very
Okay.
much. Okay. 67 seconds on the clock. Tuesday, thesis or exams?
Exams.
Research or internships?
Research.
Coffee or sleep?
Sleep.
Sleep. Thank you, Jesus. Professor or mentor?
Ooh. Mentor.
Mentor. We need to come back to that in a second. GPA or experience?
GPA.
GPA. Wow. We need to come back to that. Prestige or funding?
Oh, funding.
Funding. She's like, oh no, funding. Full-time or part-time?
Full time.
Stay at your alma mater or attend a different university?
Attend a different university.
So, is this a myth or a fact? Graduate school is just harder undergraduate school.
Can you ask me again?
Graduate school is just harder undergraduate school.
Harder than undergraduate?
Yes.
Uh, yes, I wouldn't call that a myth. Yeah, I
Okay,
think that's
okay,
true.
okay. So time's up, but I've got one more question. I got
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Record. I got 8 questions in for you Tuesday. Record. Record. Okay? Record. One more question though.
Mhm.
And I want us to actually talk about this. So tell us whether or not you think this is a myth or a fact, and then let's talk about it. More
Okay.
degrees automatically lead to higher salaries. Is that a myth or a fact?
The short answer is uh, it's a it's more of a fact than a myth, but
Hmm.
it's it depends, right? The research says it depends.
So I
Tells me
like I
that.
like how you said it's more of a myth than a fact, and then you said the research says it depends. So I would
It's
have
more than a fact than a myth.
more a
It's more of a
fact than a myth.
fact than a myth.
So
Yes.
I'm the opposite. I think it's more of a
Mm,
myth than a fact, but we would end
mm,
up in the exact same place because the
mm,
research suggests otherwise. But I've
mm,
actually found, unfortunately, in a lot of spaces that if you leave immediately after undergrad and go into grad school and you're not working at the same time, i.e., you're not gaining any experience whatsoever, the likelihood that your salary is going to get a lot higher is actually not the research does not support that, but I do
mm,
see the research supporting that with experience and the higher degrees or more degrees you will get more your salary does increase. um there was a time, I want to say about 10, 15, maybe even 20 years ago, we all thought the more degrees I get, I used to
mm,
actually tell people used to actually tell me numbers, or you make $20,000 to $30,000 more and $40,000 more.
mm,
And I'm only speaking about Tosin here. I'm not speaking about anybody else.
mm.
My personal experience. Do you know the factor that I actually think makes a difference with regards to how much more of a salary you would get? Let's see if you can take a wild guess, Tuesday. What singular factor? I wish this
Your
was live.
network?
This is one of those where I wish it was a live audience because I want to hear what everybody else has to say as well.
A part of me was thinking like your network, like who is referring you to certain things. My only reason for that was my network has probably contributed to around 85 to 90% of the work that I've gotten in my life and life course.
I love it.
Like, yeah, so
I wish I could
yeah.
say the same. In my experience, the singular factor that has led to increase or that has impacted a higher salary
Mm,
is gender.
mm,
That's it.
mm,
I'm not going to
mm,
say the story here, but I have a harrowing story of going in for the exact same position with a colleague. And because the colleague was male, we had the same degrees. In fact, I'd had it longer
Mm,
because, again, Tosin graduated at 19. So I'd had it longer. We were going for the
mm,
exact same position, exact same degrees, parallel experience, to be honest with you. And when I
mm,
saw, and we were good friends, so we were literally telling each other what our interview process was. And this particular
mm,
person was offered from the very beginning $45,000 more than I was. 45,
mm,
yes, ma'am,
mhm.
$45,000 more. And then that was my eye opener of when people talk about gender disparities when it comes to pay scales, it's not a myth. It's a real thing that,
Oh yeah, it's
regardless
very
of your
real.
degrees, the factor that really impacts the salary is gender. But this episode is not about gender inequity, even though it can be. This
It
one is
can be.
about, it
It's
can
definitely a part of
be.
the conversation.
Listen, it
Yeah.
can be. I wanted to come back when I said professor or mentor. You said mentor. Give me more.
Yeah, I think my favorite professors have been extraordinary mentors. And I think it's because mentorship feels more human. I think
Mm,
professorship can feel a little distant at times. And I think that in the scope of like choosing a graduate program, of course, I think people flock to programs because of like prestige and they think, oh my gosh, I really like this professor's research and like this aligns with my research. Um, in my experience, there's many things that contribute to how much a professor can invest in you as a graduate student. And so I think that it's really important to, yes, find someone who is well trained and all that jazz, which, if you're a professor, you kind of have that, right? But I think that someone who is able to provide feedback in a timely fashion and also that's able to meet you as a person,
yeah.
right? And say, like, yeah, I know you have X, Y, or Z happening. How can we be flexible? How can we still actualize whatever dream that you have? And I think that as I've moved into a mentorship capacity, it has made me think very differently around how I want to be mentored, but then also how I teach. So, like, I teach with mentorship in mind. Like, I teach with the idea that all of the students in my classroom could be students that, like, I mentor at some point. So, like, what do I want them to take away? What kind of warmth do I want to bring to the classroom? What kind of presence? What kind of, like, personhood do I exist in? Because that role models for them their expectations, moving forward. So, yeah, I think that you can be a really, really great professor and not be a great mentor. But I think that great mentors are people who I think do enough self excavation to be really great professors. So yeah, and I've also had really, really great mentors. So shout out to my mentors. Yeah.
Most of my, as you were saying that, just running through names in my head, most of my mentors don't even know that they're my mentors.
Mm,
And I always advise people that you can have a mentor by studying different people around you,
mm,
some people that you've never met actually in life, but you get enough proximity to the way they live their lives, to the things that they stand for, and so on and so forth. So I definitely agree with you, because sometimes, not entirely to any fault of their own, I do think some professors end up being more transactional in the
mm,
process of them being a professor. And it's, again, I don't think it's a fault of their own. You listen, you're given a curriculum, and
mm,
because we are paying for this education, if you will, you know that you must met out elements of that curriculum by a certain time period, and it must be graded a certain way, and so on and so forth. But then what happens after the content has been delivered? Because for a good number of us,
mhm,
as I hope you would agree, we can learn some of these things on our own. We don't necessarily need a human being there guiding us
mm,
through it. And so it's often the stuff that happens outside of that that we may particularly want to pay attention to. Going to pivot ever so slightly, Tuesday. Before you started graduate school, and I'm going all the way back to the first time you went in, what did you
Hmm.
think grad school was going to be like? Like, what did you envision it was going to be like?
I think that so there were grad students that I knew from being an undergrad. They were, my teaching assistant, or not my teaching, but they were the TAs for the classes that I took. So I really thought that, oh, and actually, I think in my senior year of undergrad, I had actually taken a course with, oh my gosh, Dr. Patricia Hill Collins. It was a public sociology course. And oh, that wasn't the grad. I had taken that wasn't I took a grad class. I think it was like sociology of the self. But I took a grad class just to like sit in and see what it was all about.
And this is while you were
And
an
I really
undergrad.
this is why I was yeah, it's why I was an undergrad. And I really loved the course. It was absolutely phenomenal. And I think that it was just like, oh, we just sit around and have like really cool conversations. Like we read and then we talk, and we read a lot and we talk a lot. And like occasionally we write some papers. But I think one of the things I didn't expect was kind of, and this is again in full transparency, I think that graduate school was a lot lonelier than undergrad, and I wasn't expecting that, particularly as someone that went to the same institution for undergrad and grad initially. I was just like, wow, like all my like I was so used to having like tons of friends around, and I'm gonna sit in your room, and then you're gonna come to my room, and we're gonna go to the cafeteria together, then we'll like go to exercise together, then we'll like play volleyball, and then we'll get more food. And right, it was that kind of rhythm of life. And I think that it was really interesting because grad school felt, I mean, people didn't live on campus,
Yeah,
so,
yeah,
people, it was like, oh, some folks are driving to a different city, and, all the stuff. Some people were married and with children. And so it was just a very different relationship to like to connection.
yeah.
And so I think that I didn't realize how much that bothered me as a person. And then also, after undergrad, a lot of my friends are working. So
Yes.
it was very different to see people like, hey, you want to hang out? And they're like, oh, I got to go to work tomorrow. Or like, hey, and I'm like, oh, like, do you want to like co work? And they're like, I can't co work. I'm at work. Like, right. And so, it was that. And so I think that, that was a really big shift that I wasn't initially thinking about.
Yeah.
And I think that people should consider like how they cultivate community in grad
Mm.
school, which I feel like now the second time being in grad school at Morgan, I'm so grateful because I have been so intentional around like building community within my cohort, but then also like having a really, really strong, and my family, I'm very close to my family, but having like a very strong kinship tie, really strong like sisterhood that like of women that I can just go to and say like, hey sis, like I just need to ramble for a little bit, or like, hey, these are just my core people, right? And so, yeah, I think that's really important.
I'm
So,
actually glad that you mentioned it because I was going to ask you whether or not I was going to have you talk about the community versus the individuality part of it. And you
mm,
went there. You literally talked about how
mm,
you weren't prepared for I don't want to say lonely because you didn't use the word lonely, but you did say how individual the experience was
mm,
with regards to grad school. I was lucky that from the very first, because everyone thought I was a kid, right? So from the very
mm,
first week or so that I was at Howard University, they thought I was an undergrad. I happened to
mm,
belong to a sorority, and I had lost my jacket on the floor, not on the floor,
mm,
literally on the streets. And so one of the sorority sisters had tried to track me down. Everybody just thought this was just another undergrad kid around. And because of that,
mm,
I had built in community until not until, even when they found out I was in grad school, we were still good. But the truth
Hmm.
is, my entryway into the community that I had was because they thought I was an undergraduate student. So I'm
Hmm.
wondering what the data shows, because I don't have any research on it,
Hmm.
with regards to how people feel with regards to community building when they get to grad school, as opposed to, there isn't a single person that I've spoken to who's at an HBCU especially, that talks about how much there's so much community at the undergraduate level. And now I'm wondering whether you feel a bit of a difference as you matriculate into grad school. Tuesday. I think I know your answer to this question, so I'm not going to ask it. I'm not going to ask this. If you could sit down with every college student, and I happen to, every college senior, not every college student, and in my role, I happen to get a lot of exposure to college seniors. What's one thing you would tell them as they're applying for grad school that nobody told you?
Hmm.
By the way, as Tuesday is cogitating on this, I love that wherever she joins us, there's always good music in the background. And half of the time, if you're watching us and you just see me like do my hands a little bit here and there, it's because I'm hearing the music and I'm feeling it. I love music. I actually want us to end this episode on some of Tuesday's favorite artists and songs, even though it has nothing to do with this
Yeah.
episode.
It's interesting. I think a lesson that could be important, I'm not sure if it was something that I was given, is to think about where you see yourself at the end of the journey,
Wow.
and if that person that you meet at the end of the journey is someone you want to become.
Jesus Christ.
I think that's really important. Um, because I think that sometimes like grad school can sound kind of, it's like the sexy thing sometimes, right? It's like, oh, like I'm getting a doctorate. Like, oh, you're gonna be a doctor? Like, I'll be a doctor. Or like I'm getting my master's, like I think that sometimes it's like, it's that, but it's like it once you're done with it, do you want to meet that person? Like, are you happy with that person? And I'm saying this because like um I think that there are very practical implications for getting degrees, right? Like, do you want to work at a research one? Do you want to work at a teaching college? Do you want to work for a think tank? There are those kind of things that I think are important to consider.
Mm-hmm.
Again, like at the end of it, what do you want the outcome to be? But also, I think while those questions are very important, I've maybe been asking myself this more recently is just like at the end of my journey, will I be happy to meet myself? Will I be happy with the woman that I have become as a result of all the research? So after all the interviews are done, because they're gonna get done, after all of the coding and all the stuff, at the end of it, will I be happy with myself? Because the thing is, like, you have to live a life after grad school. So I like
Absolutely.
to think like what kind of relationships did I cultivate? What kind of experiences did I had? And that's also informing how I see the journey. So I think that again, when I started at Morgan, I was so clear. Like the clarity was just incredible. But I was just so clear on who I wanted to become at the end. And I said, okay, now that I know that like I want to be this person and I want to work in this kind of space, and I want to have all these things and I know how these things will aid me in like helping community and all the things that I want to do. Okay, cool. Let's just work backwards now. Like all I have to do is work backwards because I already know what the plan is. I already know who I want to become. And I think that like that's a little bit different from undergrad because I think that undergrad, sometimes there's just this like, I need to get a degree because I'm
Yeah.
here. And like, that's the point. I think that when you get to grad school, there's still this like I want the degree, but I also like want to have impact. And I think that your impact changes in graduate school. So really starting with like that at the center is really important. Um so like yes, the like who will I become, but like how does that person have a different impact in the world, or in your own world, right? It
Yeah.
doesn't have to be this like global impact right, but it's like how does my community change, how's my relationship with my family change, how does my relationship with myself change as a product of me going through this process. And that was not something that I asked myself initially when I started as an undergrad going into grad school, that I think is really important for folks to consider.
Tuesday, I got quiet and you heard me say Jesus Christ earlier on. um, I've had so many reactions listening to your response. And you know this because we had a lovely conversation before we started recording, and I said something whilst you shared a story that you've always been that girl. And and so the reason why I'm tying that into, and I wrote down what you said, where you see yourself at the end of the journey, would you want to meet that person? That's the advice you would give.
Hmm.
What made me say Jesus is I felt that was heavy. Like I'm thinking
Hmm.
about 19-year-old Tosin, who the only reason why she went to grad school is because she had not been she did not feel that she had been challenged in undergrad, even though it was, they say, a challenging program. I don't know if I would have been able to answer that question. Let's say I got that advice from
Hmm.
Tuesday, right? Like the advice you just gave now.
Hmm.
I don't know if I'd be able to answer that question. And if I did not know how to answer that question, then my immediate thought was, then what do I do next? Do
Hmm.
you get what I'm saying? So if Tosin, 19-year-old Tosin,
Hmm.
could not answer where you see yourself at the end of the journey, would you want to meet that person? A lot of 19-year-olds will give you a flippant answer. That's not me.
Hmm.
And I think there are a lot more people like me as well who would have thought, but I don't know where I see myself at the end of the journey.
I would say, this is a little tangential, but I was having a conversation with a friend that relates here. We were talking, oddly enough, I promise this is going to come back, but we were talking about trad wives and the trad wife trend that's going on
Okay.
online right
Okay.
now. And I bring this up because there's been this conversation that's really centered around, I think, like maybe 16 to 19-year-old white women. I don't think it's just exclusive to middle America, but that I think it's the conversation has been there. And the thing about trad wives is particularly interesting to the conversation we're having right now is um essentially these women have been coming online and saying like, I don't need to go to college, I don't need higher
Yeah.
education,
Yeah.
like I just want to have children, and you should have as many children as
And
possible.
stay at home and da da
Right,
da.
and stay at home, right? And it's interesting because again, the trad wife trend has been very much so a kind of within white women, to be honest. Like I haven't seen black trad wives, to be honest. But what I have seen is a kind of discourse online around I think people have been like misusing a James Baldwin quote, which says something to the extent of like, I don't dream of labor. Um, and people have been like, yeah, I don't dream of labor either. Yeah, like I don't want to labor. And I think that there's something very different from work and labor. And maybe this is pure semantics, right? And as it relates to the grad school journey, I am
Mm.
very clear that work for me is a calling, which doesn't mean that things that you're called toward do not require energy, that they don't require intention, that they don't require focus. I think that labor, and again, this could just purely be semantics, but I think that when I think about labor, I think of it in a very like Marxian perspective of like, your relationship to capital and like labor is something that is performed for capitalism, right?
Mm.
And I'm saying this because I think that as as a 19-year-old would think about like, why would I go to grad school? I think that, and this is again a little more of my own perspective. I don't want to be like, this is what sociologists would say, but rather just what I'm thinking. I think that, you really have to think about what your spirit is called toward.
Mhm.
Um, and I think that it's such an important calling, and that what calls to you, like what is the thing that like it's just always irking you, like it's on you. Like for some folks, it's like they've always loved animals and it's just on them. Like some people, it literally is like theology, that's on them, right? It's just whatever the thing is that just cannot get off of
Of
you.
your mind.
I think that is the calling. That is the thing that you have the privilege to journey with through life. And it's really interesting because when I thought about, again, the trad wife kind of thing, and it's someone like, yeah, you never have to work another day in your life, just sit somewhere and have babies. Not that I don't find value in motherhood, because I have a phenomenal mother and I see motherhood as such a divine privilege, to be
Yeah.
honest. But I would also say that I find it to be so important to wake up every day and decide what kind of work I get to do and how I get to do that work, who I get to do that work with, how I get to like be in conversation with people and inspire them to also like listen to their calling and think differently about the world. And that feels very, it's just sacred. And I think like if I were told to never do that
Do
again, that
that.
would make me very sad, you know? Um, so
So
all that to say,
sorry.
yeah.
No, 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 go ahead.
Mm. Yeah, no, all that to say, I think that, like, sometimes when people are having these conversations around, like, "Oh, college isn't for everyone," or like grad school isn't for everyone, that kind of thing. I think to myself, like, well, what are you called toward, right? What is that calling for you? And how does this institution, how does this degree help you to do the thing that you want to do that you're called toward? And I really just see graduate school as like a step toward having more focused attention toward whatever the calling is. And there's so many areas, there's so many things that people are called toward doing. um but yeah, that's kind of my my soapbox on it.
And not
So
bad at
yeah.
all. I would not add, I'm not adding a
Mm.
single thing to your soapbox, and I'm not taking anything away from it either. Believe it
Mhm.
or not, it literally just dawned to me this very second. And I know people may choose not to believe me, but this is the truth. I don't have this written down anywhere. We are two Black women, one with the doctorate, one might as well call her Dr. Barnes. It's a
Yeah.
second or two away, and we represent, according to the statistics, a group that is the most degreed in the United States of
Mm.
America, and with also the most advanced degrees in the United States of America. What does that say about Black women, if anything? Do you celebrate that statistic, or do you, what happens when you hear that statistic? Because I know you've heard it, we've all heard it.
Yeah.
What comes to mind? That's I just want to know what comes to mind when you hear that. And I'm not going to share mine, because if I share mine, we'll be here for 2 more hours. But what comes to mind when you hear that statistic?
I hear a lot of faith and sacrifice. That's what initially comes to mind. I know how much just the enormity of faith you must have in yourself to go on the journey of focus for 2, 3, sometimes 10 years in graduate school, right? And so I think when people talk about, being degreed or not being degreed and what does it mean, I think, all it really is you focusing on a goal for a extended period of time and being willing to take critique and feedback around that goal. Um, and not everyone is willing to go through that process. I don't think that it's impossible. I don't think that people who get advanced degrees are somehow better. I do think that it says something about focus and discipline, um, and again, faith. And I think that Black women, in my experience, have been so filled with like an enormous amount of faith, both in ourselves, but then also like just being transparent, like faith in God, like feeling like again, kind of going back to that calling conversation. It's like, yeah, this isn't just about me. It's about like my
I
ancestors. It's
dread the
about all
pain.
the people who weren't able to like be in these spaces before. And now I can change the narrative because, and this is my last little thing, but being very clear that like advanced degrees oftentimes are about knowledge creation, right? So that when people talk about like, oh, breaking generational curses, like knowledge is a generational curse at times. Like what knowledge people have ascribed to before has been a kind of curse. Like when we think about like, you know, the kind of mythologies around black people, the kind of like ways that like people have ascribed to notions of like black inferiority around intelligence, or like the kind of physical nature of black people being more toward labor than toward intellectualism, like all of that is a kind of curse. And so for people, for black women to enter these spaces and say, actually I'm going to do research, actually I'm going to like dig up the work of our ancestors and say, nah, whatever we've been reading, that ain't true, that ain't it, it's so important. And so again, I feel very privileged and very grateful to also be in this kind of legacy of
Mm.
like shifting the narrative and of creating new knowledge, because it's that knowledge that we can envision different futures, that we can see ourselves, not just again for knowledge for knowledge sake, right, but like that we get to be change makers, we get to see our community shift and our family shift, and like us individually shift. Like I'm a different person now because of all the work, right? That isn't just about a grade or just about a degree, but it's about like self evolution. Um, so yeah, so yeah, that's kind of that.
I just took a deep breath.
Mm,
Like I said, I'm not sharing what my thoughts are on that
mm,
phrase, or on that statistic, because I've got a lot of them, and I think it's one of those things that I'm going to steal I'm going to steal a word that you heard Tuesday say earlier on, that we academics say. It's very nuanced, my response to
mm,
that.
mm,
um my brain just said, Tosin, when our college seniors get this letter, what are they going to make of this letter that we have given them today,
mm,
Tuesday? If you could wrap this letter up in one quick sentence of a summary, what does the letter say to the college senior who does not know what to expect from grad school, but is thinking about
mm,
grad school? What's the thesis of this letter?
mm. Oh my gosh, this is gonna sound so abstract. Um,
I'm going to write it
but love
down.
is a portal. Love is a portal. Um, and it will take you to so many worlds. Be anchored in yourself so that you can see those worlds for what they are, and that you can also make your way back home. And again, very abstract.
I'm not adding a
but
single
that's
thing
the
to listen.
but that but that's I
Tuesday,
really
are
feel
you
like
also a poet that we weren't
I
aware? There
am.
you
I am
go.
a
Okay,
poet. I
that's
am a
it.
poet.
That is
Yeah.
it. That's it.
Yeah.
End this episode for me, Tuesday, by finishing this phrase. Graduate school is worth it when,
You know yourself.
as always, it is impossible for you to tune into I Love My HBCU question mark, listen to our guests, see our guests, and not like this episode. Tuesday's amazing. I'm grateful she was able to join me for a second summer episode, a summer series episode.
Mm,
Tuesday, thank you so much. As always, I look forward to our next conversation because I don't think this is going to be the last one.
mm,
But to everybody else, I hope that I have done my due diligence in encouraging you to subscribe to I Love My HBCU question mark wherever you get
mm.
your podcasts. Yours in HBCU love. See you next episode. Tuesday Barnes, thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You've been listening to I Love My HBCU question mark. Let's keep the conversation going as we share our stories and encourage more practical support of HBCUs, whilst of course holding each other accountable. Don't forget to follow and subscribe for the latest episodes. Until next time, love and lift your HBCU.